Well, thank you everybody for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you guys. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach today and not use the tennis court really, hardly at all. No balls, no hitters. I want to talk to you guys as I had the opportunity to think about where is an area that we can talk through and work on that it might be a little bit outside the box, a little bit different, than other people that are going to come in here and talk to you today. And so I wanted to talk to you guys about managing the match. About a little bit more on the mental side, the way that you're going to approach going into a match, your preparation, how you're going to manage point to point, how you're going to compete throughout the match, and then how you're going to take that feedback from it and improve. And so for us at Baylor, one of the first things that we do is try to figure out where the guy is at, what kind of a competitor he is, how he manages himself point to point, and then match to match. And it really takes a while before we'll ever get to a point where we can talk about the tennis. It's very easy to watch a player play and say, okay, he's got to do this on the forehand, or his serve needs to go here, or he struggles in this pattern. But until he understands how to really control himself as a competitor during a match, I feel like we can't really talk about the tennis. I had a player this fall who went 1-11. That probably doesn't instill any confidence in you guys with me talking, but went 1-11. And the most important thing to him was, as the matches wore on, we were behind him. We were comfortable. We were going to feed him afterwards. We were going to give him a bed to sleep in, and he was going to be able to wake up and try again the next day. And it wasn't until the last practice of the fall that I actually went out onto the court and helped him understand that there was a pattern that he could utilize a little bit better. And that was because of the mental side of everything that he was doing. Mind you, he was the #1 ranked junior in his country. He's represented his country in Davis Cup. He's won professional tournaments before him. He's one of the best players in the world. And it just doesn't matter how he swings the racket if he doesn't understand how to properly approach the match. And so I'm going to break some of these things down that we work on that I think are strategies as a competitor and as a coach of competitors that can help you guys, I would say, right away. Something that you can do right away. And then I would love to answer any questions towards the end. So I'll try to move through this quickly so that we can, if it's a little outside the box, you guys can ask questions, break anything down that you guys might have for me, as well as we can go off topic and talk about anything that you guys may have. So I want to give everybody the opportunity to speak if necessary or if you guys desire. So the big thing when you talk about pre-match, and I love talking about this because I think it teaches discipline as well. I think it's even more important in you guys' stage, but when the guys get to me at 18 or 19 years old, I look at it as 4 of the most important years of their life. They're growing from boys to young men. And by teaching disciplines and holding them accountable to certain things off the court, I think that's going to, and on the court, it's also going to help them become a better person, hopefully set them up for success whenever the ball stops bouncing. We talk about the ball stopping bouncing a lot. I hope it isn't until they're 40 with enough money to retire from the tour, but for 99% of them, that's not going to be the case. And they're going to go off and hopefully be successful in something other than tennis. But what we talk about is, are we as prepared as we possibly can be? Because there are going to be times where we're going to be the better player and expected to win, or the better team and expected to win. There might be a lot of times where it's very close and we don't know who's going to come out on top, or we're a clear underdog in the match. And what we can control is how we prepare best to be ready for the match. And that's, are we getting enough sleep? How are we sleeping? Are we getting consistency with our sleep patterns? How are we fueling ourselves, not just the night before and in the morning right before we play, but the whole week heading into competition? Are we hydrating properly? You would be amazed at how poorly trained my guys are when they get to Baylor, most of them, no matter where they are. Probably worse in America than those that come internationally, sadly. I have a guy he's a sophomore and he doesn't drink water. And it's really hurting him. And so these are things that they take no talent. It's just a discipline to understand the information that you would be shocked these young men and young women don't necessarily understand yet. How are they approaching the day of the match? So I bet if you ask your players, they would say none of them meditate. I certainly, as a high school player, I didn't meditate. I didn't meditate till late in my college playing days. Meditation, visualization, a quiet time, listening to music, maybe a similar playlist, consistency, thinking back to your best performances, and understanding how you led up to that. Those are big things for our players in making sure that they're focused. It's very easy, I think, as a coach to just get caught up in, okay, we've got, do we have the balls? Do we have the rackets? Do we have the string? Is everything ready? I'm going to go, we're coaching against one of my best buddies. I'm going to go and visit with him, kind of before the match or during the warm-up. And it's totally lost that the players need that consistency in their preparation to hopefully have a consistent performance. It's hard enough for these kids as it is to go out there and compete. We need to make sure that they're set up well to be able to have the best chance to perform. And one thing that I wrote it at the end as I was writing my notes to prepare for this, the one thing I wrote at the end were what's our most important job as a coach with young players. And I thought about saying it at the end, but I thought I really need to bring it at the beginning because I think it really shapes where I come from as a coach. And our two biggest jobs are build confidence and decrease pressure. I know that my guys are totally freaked out going into competition all the time because there's so much pressure on them to win for their school, to prove to the coaching staff and their teammates that they belong, to accomplish what the team accomplished last year or more. Are they going to be able to make it at the next level? How do they justify, getting a sponsorship or funding from their federation to be able to play? And it's all relative, right? I mean, you go down into the high school level, they have the same pressures. It's just slightly different. And so I think that is a huge piece of how can we build confidence and decrease pressure. And it all starts with how are we preparing for the match? How are we providing them consistency? Are we warming up the same way every single time? If you're going to go out and play doubles, do you warm up with your doubles partner? We do the same drills. Now, we'll change it if it's not working, but we do the same drills going into a performance every single match. Some guys need slightly different things. We'll pull those guys off and do those things as well and make sure that we build in the time. We're eating at the same time. We're warming up at the same time. We're doing the same things so that our guys are comfortable before they go out onto the match court to perform. Once you start the match, you have to have a clear mind and a clear idea of what you're trying to do. And so I would guess if you guys went through this exercise, your players would struggle to say what's their plan A as they go out onto the match. And if they're having the best day of their lives, what does that look like? How do they play? If it's not working, what's plan B? What's their safe home base that they can go to when they really need that they can produce every single day? And then if things are just not working, horrible day, everything's against them, they're losing, what's plan C? How are they going to get to try something new so they don't go down without a fight? When I ask my players, and some of them are top 500 in the world, top 350, they can't answer that question. They barely can answer plan A. And so that's a huge piece of the exercise of having them understand what are they actually trying to do out there. And once they know, then being able to go out there and put it out on the court. I think especially at this level, we do some scouting, but every day is a little bit different in tennis, you know, and what we're going to bring to the table, what our opponent's going to bring to the table. We don't even know, you know, until, for us, it's an hour before the match, who's playing who. So there's not a lot of time to match up players or say, okay, you're going to talk to him the night before. This is the strategy against this guy, because it's very likely they're not going to play that person. So how you look out on the court is going to send a strong message to your opponent. Even my guys that have gone on to have success on the tour, after matches, we have this first conversation is, don't forget that there's somebody else playing this match besides you. Or if it's doubles, don't forget there's 3 other guys out onto the court, you know, that are also playing the match. If you look like you're having the best day of your life, your opponent's probably not going to know that it might not be your best day. You very well could be tricking them. Okay? It goes the same way if you look like you're having the worst day of your life. You might be playing great, but if you have bad body language, or even if you have no body language, you move around the court very slow, you're very quiet, reserved, head down, small body language, that's going to give your opponent hope. Now, I try to look at it from what can my players do, and that is pay attention to what the other guy's doing and how he looks and what's happening over there, because they might give you an opportunity to come back. And how do we control our body language, and how do we make sure that we're helping our player as a coach control their body language? And they're going to, I mean, when my guy's screaming at the wall or hitting his racket up against the fence, he's not busy looking at the fact that this guy rolled his ankle and, you know, is really is hurting and struggling. There's a lot that goes on that these players in their emotional state miss. And so I think it's very important for us, as best we can, because there's a lot of players playing, to pay attention to what's going on and try to feed that positivity and that you know, good body language, good energy reinforcement. Again, it builds confidence, and it will somewhat decrease the pressure that they're under. One question, I would say most of our guys, when they first get to Baylor, they'll tell you that what's happening on court 2 does not affect court 1. And I couldn't disagree more. I think at every level, what's happening on every single court is for sure having an effect. I mean, we'll see all 6 courts swing at the same time, you know, or vice versa. Okay, doubles, it's very, very prevalent. So making sure, if not, you might be down 6-1, 3-0, okay? But chances are your teammate 3 courts down isn't going to look over. I mean, if they are, that's probably not good, but they're not going to look over and look for the scorecard to see, oh, is Harry winning or is he losing? But he'll be able to tell either he's screaming positively or negatively, or look over just out of a corner of his eye, see his head down, you know, maybe he's hitting the net or smacking balls around, and that will hurt your teammates. And that will hurt not just you, but everybody else. And so I think as a coach, I think that's a very important thing to manage as you're going through the match. And just in general, making sure that you're paying attention to that consistency of however we are acting, we have an opportunity to improve ourselves, okay? And so I think a lot of players, certainly my players, feel like they need to play well to have good body language. They wait till something really good happens and then they get excited. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I've never seen a player have great body language and really be excited and positive and play worse and have their worst day. It's just never happened. But you have to act the part to start playing, as opposed to, I mean, yes, there's going to be certain days where things are going to go your way, but I think you have to start there in order to give yourself the best chance to play particularly well. So, you know, there's some strategies that we work on, and my guys think it's crazy, but we'll go out on the court with no balls, just the racket, and okay, you're going to serve wide here, you're going to play, you know, inside-out forehand, and then you're going to have hit a winner. Okay, how do you then take that and go back, and what's your routine going to be like in between points? Because such a huge part of the match, there are no balls hit. right? You're in between points, you're stuck in your own thoughts, and you're either helping yourself or you're hurting yourself. You're usually not staying the same. And so we work on that routine. This is first point of the game, last point of the set, doesn't matter, okay? What are we doing in between points? And it should look different for everybody. My guys, one guy will go back, towel, okay? I have a guy that has pictures of his family on the butt cap of his racket. That centers him. He remembers his why every single time, okay? Other guys have wristbands. We have wristbands with our values on them. They'll look at the values, and that will center them. Other guys just go back. They don't like to go to the towel every time. They'll just touch the fence, and then once they turn, they're ready for the next point. That's when things are going well, or neutral. They have to have a routine. They can't be doing different things every time. At the highest level, players look around. They get distracted. They start thinking about the score. Oh, I'm in a winning position. Oh, I'm in a losing position. I wonder if our team's going to win. I have a great dinner planned tonight, or I'm going out on a date later. And they just start thinking about something else because it just happens. So the routine keeps you focused. What's your self-talk going to be like? How are you going to center yourself to get ready for the next point? And then once you approach, what's my plan A? What am I trying to do right now? What's my plan B if A is not working? How am I going to find a way to turn the match around plan C? If you're really struggling and you get frustrated, we talk about green light, yellow light, red light. Okay, green lights go, we're feeling good, we're really positive, okay, we're sticking to our routines. Yellow, red, things are starting to go off the rails. You're getting frustrated. How do you recognize that that's happening and change it? How do you recognize that that's happening and change it? And we have our guys work through a plan of, okay, this is what I'm going to do to make the trigger. I have a rubber band. I'm going to, slap it on my wrist to say, okay, I'm in the red zone. Now I need to go back and focus on my breathing. However you want to do that. I mean, there's lots of different breathing, 6-2-8, 5-5-5. I mean, there's lots of different breathing. If you want to talk more to me about it, we can talk about it. I'm no expert, but I know that it's really important. And so we talk about a trigger to focus on a good deep breath, reset, and then when you turn back to walk to the court, I'm all in now. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to play the next point. And I need to get back into the green light zone as quickly as possible. And so those are the big things as a player that we focus on before we talk about anything having to do with these are his strengths or weaknesses as a player. The piece that I would say we talk about as coaches or we focus on is within that plan A, plan B, plan C. And once the guys are focused and ready and in the match, we really talk to them about, okay, guys, do you understand what you're doing well? Okay? Do you understand how that matches up with maybe how you can expose your opponent? And that's mentally or physically. And how are we going to give you the best opportunity to win on the day? So I think that that's a big piece for us as coaches that we can really do to positively impact the player. And again, it's consistency. How you're going to talk to or relate to one player is very different from the next. And so for us, we try to match up our coaches on 2 or 3 courts that will relate the best to each particular player, personality-wise, and what they need. For me, I usually fill in the gaps, and if I need to be a rah-rah guy for this person or sit on the bench with my legs crossed, I think in the national championship match, everybody was making fun of me on TV because I never moved. I just sat there with my legs crossed sitting on the top of the bench because my Romanian player at the time, very, very emotional. And so if I show emotion, he'll get too high and then he'll get too low and break all of his rackets. And so I just don't show any reaction at all because he will already have enough of that energy. He just needs me to be there to keep him calm enough to compete because he's fire as it is. There are other guys, my Chilean, for example, right here the whole time. And so I have to be super rah-rah just to get him to show that he has a pulse, in a lot of these matches. And so, it's that's an important piece of the puzzle. But I think the disciplines of how you compete can separate you regardless of what your level is as a tennis player. And I would say finishing out the match, and once you've completed the match, the feedback that you're going to give to the player shouldn't just be about how the player played, what they can do. Certainly you want to talk about what they did well, areas for improvement. But to me, being consistent from our perspective as a coach on you have to eliminate the result as much as possible. I've seen a lot of coaches where if you win, everything's great. And if you lose, everything's terrible. Or that's the only time that players get feedback is when they lose. All the time, if my player wins 6-0, 6-0, there was something for sure that they could have done better. And we have to give them credit for what they did and have something that they can work on. That also makes it a lot easier for them to gain feedback and be open to hearing it when they lose, because all they're thinking is, I've lost and I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure. It can't be that way. It has to be focused. What did you do well? What do we need to work on, and address them the same no matter what. And I think a lot of that is, how did you manage the match? Were you in there the entire time? Did you take points off? Were you competing every single point? How were your routines? Did you use the towel? Did you manage? Did you fuel properly? Did you get distracted? Not just how did you serve? How did you return? All of these different things. And I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle for players' development. And I just think that's a big reason why I wanted to talk to you all about this today, was because we can make a huge impact on their competitive level right now. It's going to take time to develop the forehand. It takes a lot of time to improve the serve. But how they compete can get better tomorrow. And hopefully have huge percentage improvements just by managing their emotions, having discipline in the way that they prepare for a match, go about the match, and then take information away from the match to then use it for the practice court the next day, and then hopefully the following matches. And so I think we have a huge impact on them in that regard. And that is so much more than just how well do you and I teach the forehand or the backhand. And I think we can get very caught up in the technique and even the tactics of what's happening in a match. There's so much more to it as a competitor, and I think players respond very well when they start competing well. So if they can see that they are having consistency with their competitiveness, and they feel confidence from you and themselves to go out and perform, and that they can find different ways to win, even if it's not necessarily pretty all the time, they'll be more bought into the process of overall technical and tactical development. One thing I will say, you guys are going to think this is silly, but my biggest thing that I talk to my players about, and they were making fun of me as I said I was going to say this at the end, is they should always have a towel. They should always have a towel with them at the back of the court. And if my players go out to warm up, and I don't care how cold it is or where we are, if they don't have a towel, that's it. Like, that's the only thing I'll talk about with my freshmen for the first probably 2 months, is do you have your towel or not? Go to the towel, use the towel, let me go get the towel for you and bring it to you. And they absolutely hate it, but it makes them manage their time and their emotions. And that allows them, without having to say anything else, to reset. So my biggest takeaway for you guys is make sure your players have a towel. And if they don't like a plain white towel, you can get cool towels made. We do that sometimes. The guys, for some reason, think that that's neat, and put their logo on it and everything and make it special for them. And that is a big area for us, your best tennis out on the match court in pressure situations. And I would say that that's the biggest disconnect from guys that we get that come in highly talented but have trouble consistently putting it out onto the court. And if they struggle, they just pack their bags up and say, I'll try again tomorrow. And if you're going to win at the highest level of high school, win at the highest level of college, and make money on the tour, you have to find ways to have success when you're not having your best day. And so when you don't feel good, you don't get to pack your bag up and go home and try again tomorrow. You've got to be able to produce and find ways to be successful even when you're struggling. And I think that the way you manage the match is ultimately going to cause success or failure for you as a competitor. Well, I'd love to take any questions that anybody has. Yes?
When you're you don't have as many players as a lot of coaches
Yes.
have, but now, have you ever used like have a certain handout that before the match they fill out certain things in regards to their A game, B game,
Yes.
C game, and then at the end they actually write down that too to kind of go over it? Or have you found, and has that been successful, or what kind of buy-in, buy-out do you have from the players?
No, that's a great question. We produce note cards where we'll actually work through with each player what's their A game, what's their B game, what's their C game. And that will be something that they have in their bags. So we'll laminate it, put it in their bag. They can pull it out on the changeover and look at it. We'll also carry them with us too, just as we're to make sure that we're using the same cues and the same wording that they will use. Because that's what they wrote it, they thought it resonates with them. It's not me putting words in their mouth or ideas in their in their heads. This came from them. And in kind of refining what that actually looks like, we also will break down, what do I look like when I'm playing well? What do I look like typically when I'm struggling? What do I look like when I'm nervous or tired? And just kind of acknowledging those things and then building on them, to try to work your way out of it. What are strategies that we can do from there? We fill out match review sheets after every single match. So the guy has a piece of paper, they'll go in, they'll say, what did I do well? What did I do poorly? How was I as a competitor? What did my opponent do well? What did he do poorly? How was he as a competitor? And then what are 3 areas for improvement? As well as how can the coaches serve you better in the next match? Yes?
Have a player struggling to finish matches.
Mm-hmm.
It's tight, chose. What are some phrases or language you use for that player to get them over the top?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We have that all the time. Guys struggle to close. They go up to serve for the match. I would say for me, it's helping them understand what their best patterns are and playing those patterns under pressure. Just regardless of what the opponent is good at, having them first understand what they're good at and then having them go for it at that time, and just going up to them and reinforcing, this is your best pattern. Trust it. You've gotten yourself to this point for a reason. You are in a winning position. And then the routine is huge. Understanding that you left to your own thoughts and devices, you're going to start thinking about the result, thinking about walking up and shaking hands, or thinking about blowing that game and now it's 5-all instead of 6-4. Players quickly will go to those, self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of regards. So the more that they can forget the score and go to, okay, next point. This is my routine. This is my best pattern. I'm going to go with it when I'm under pressure. And I'm going to do the same thing I did in the last point. We try to reiterate that as much as possible. I had a player 2 years ago. He's inside 200 in doubles in the world right now. He's 330 ATP, who he lost his serving for the set 7 matches in a row. And for us, it was, okay, we're going to go back and watch the film. Go back, or if you don't have film, go back and review what happened. What did you do differently to get up to the end of the match versus that game serving at 5-4, serving at 6-5, and how can we do it differently? For him, he rushed. He got very tense. His body language got tight. You can see it from across the net as a coach and as a player. So it gave the opponent hope, and it caused them to do some things differently, strategically, that they saw would work. You know, they started to play short. For him, he struggled with the short forehand low in the court. And so they would just chip the ball back early, you know, early in the point, and he would play those points so fast. Next thing you know, he's missed 4 short forehands in a row and the game is over before anybody could have even helped him. And so it was working his way through that to understand what was happening, to, you know, work on that shot on the practice court as well, but to try to get to some patterns of, you know, self-talk and routine that made him realize, I actually can play this. These are the best patterns, to the best directions to go to for him, technically and tactically, to make sure that he's putting himself in the best position to be successful. And it takes time. It takes time, but I think you just can't give up and say, oh, he's just a weak, you know, competitor.
Quick follow-up. You've got a player, you're on court, you're taking 3 or 4 quarters, 2 or 3 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
You're down 6-3, 4-0. You know you need to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could help. What do you say before you leave that court? Or do you stay for the entirety of that match? Is that
Yeah, that's a good, I mean, that's tough. I think, you know, at the end of the day, as a coach, you're trying to get to however many points you need for the team to win. You know, so I think making sure you leave it so that they don't feel like you've quit on them is very important, but also understanding that there is a bigger goal here as a team. For me, it's about making sure each player is competing all the way to the end. And we'll review that at the end of the match. Like, we can't take, my assistant says, take his hands out of the fire. You've got to keep your hands in the fire. You've got to compete every single point, because you just don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the opponent gets tight. You know, maybe something happens physically in the match that will, you know, will adjust the way that things are going to break for that match. But just making sure that we talk about winning fast and losing slow. If you're down, take as much time as possible. You know, I mean, take your time, go to the towel, back up, play slow, you know, make your opponent hit as many winners as possible, dig for that point, and be happy about that point, because if you win this point, there's no timer. You're not going to run out of time. The clock's not going to run out. You can play until the end of time. You know, so if you win that next point, you're still in it. And so that's typically what we'll talk about with our guys, is making sure they understand that it's 1 point at a time. If you can focus on that next point, you're going to give yourself a chance and find a way. And then probably go to the ones where you can make the biggest impact, I think. Yes?
I know y'all are starting out with doubles in college, and you know, we're starting out with doubles as well. I'm just really curious, how do you approach getting your team ready for doubles? Is there specifically some drills that you found, types of drills that they need to be doing before to get them in their best mindset?
Yeah, I think it very much depends on who they are. We talk about the match starting, so we do, our guys warm up with their partners, and then 20 minutes before the match starts, we'll do 2 up, 2 back. So we go 2 up, 2 back, where we're feeding behind the net player, to alternating to each player, making sure that our guys are getting a few volleys. Then we'll go overhead, feed overheads and try to dig them out, and then we'll feed bounce overheads. We'll do that for a couple minutes, and then we'll switch, put the other 2 guys there. We talk about that being the start of the match. So if they're not, I mean, they need to be 100% intensity, focus, competitive, loud, energized, ready to go. And then we'll pop a fresh can of balls, and we'll play a 7-point tiebreaker, so they're getting the serve and return. In addition to that, some guys like either short feeds, moving up, some serve and volley feeding. A couple guys like, you know, and I think that this is pretty good for high school as well. Not every, I mean, even our guys, not everybody serves and volleys. So we'll go fast, we'll have a guy serve wide, fast feed right at their feet, trying to pick that ball up off of a return that gets by the net person. But I think it's more the mentality of making sure that they're ready. This has worked for us, but I think it's finding what works best for you guys as a competitive team, especially in college with it being a 6-game set, no ad scoring. I mean, if you get broken in the first game, it's over. You know, I mean, you get punched in the mouth right away. I've seen it where we've gotten up 5-0 on every single court because they look over and they can't believe what's happened. Next thing you know, they get broken because the other guys got down and the doubles points over in 13 minutes. And so you have to be ready. So I think any strategy you can get for them to compete before the actual first point is played, I think is critical. Yes?
Can rituals be too elaborate?
Yes.
Like Nadal, who touches his chest and his head like 15 times.
Yeah.
Is that good, bad?
I think it can be too much. I've seen it be crippling at times. I've had a guy that wouldn't step on the lines or would, take a certain number of steps, and so he's walking around to get that number of steps before he walked up to the line. I think that those things can be maybe a little bit too much at times, but I think it very much depends on the player, and if you feel like it gets them centered and ready to play. There are things that I have a player right now who gets too distracted by, making sure he has the right routine. And actually he's not ready to play because he's so worried about getting the routine down that he's not loose and free. And so it can be too much, and I think you have to pay attention to that for sure. Yes?
That was a good question. What do you do to break a person that has a bad routine, and what advice do you give them to make them realize that's bad?
Yeah, it takes time, and I think ultimately you want the players to play free and understand that you guys are on the same team and to work through that with them. I think that's something that we will struggle with. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but as a head coach, my players are somewhat afraid of me at times, or they're always trying to look really buttoned up, and so they'll do a routine that they think I want them to do, when that's actually not true. I just want them to be ready to play the point. And so when they struggle with it, it's more about taking them when they're outside of that competitive setting and calm, sitting down with them in a place, probably not my office, maybe out for a cup of coffee that's comfortable with them, for them to work through, okay, what do you feel like works best for you? How do you get to a point where you're not thinking, you know your A game, you know what you're trying to do, and maybe it's a song, you're just singing a song in your head when you're playing your best tennis, and how do you get to that point? So it's a bit abstract, but we certainly just can't let it go, or at least I try not to. Yes?
What's your time frame on the post-game, basically, I guess your post-game checklist with your player?
Yeah.
When are you doing it? Are you doing it 30 minutes, hour afterwards? Are you doing it a day afterwards? Do you have a plan where you've got, okay, I've got 15 minutes with you, then 15 minutes with you? Are you doing that? How are you doing it?
Yeah, we have the guys cool down and stretch and do all their work, ice bath, work with the trainer, everything right after the match, and that gives them probably about an hour after the match to kind of settle down emotionally, obviously physically, and take care of themselves. We feel like that's the most important thing. And then we'll meet as a team when they are eating dinner. So we'll come together, whether if it's at home, it's in the locker room. If it's on the road, we'll chat together over a meal and kind of talk as a team first. How do we compete together? I don't know how it goes for you guys, but I like when they talk. So I want to hear the players tell me how it went first before I offer anything up, because sometimes I might think it was horrible and they think it was great. Okay, then where's the disconnect? Or vice versa. I might think it's great and they're going to say it's horrible. And getting everybody to contribute, not just the captains, not just the older guys. I want the young guys to contribute, guys that were off the court that didn't play, that are watching. Versus the guys that were last match on in the heat of battle. I want to hear how that was. We usually talk about what's something you did well, what's something you can do better, and what are we going to take moving forward? How are we going to improve this tomorrow? So we'll usually go through that routine. And then individually, if it was something extreme, I'll pull guys aside after the meeting and we'll just say, hey, let's chat about this. If something really stood out, positive or negative. I would say more times it's like, hey man, you did a really good job out there in this regard. Like, let's keep working on that. I saw that you've been working hard on this and it's really coming together for you. Keep up the good work. I'll never criticize in public. I'll criticize the team sometimes or me, but I'll never call out a player and say you didn't do a good job. I'm a big believer in, praise in public, criticize in private, or critique in private, however you want to look at it. And so we'll bring the guys usually the next day or 2 days later, depending on who it is and how they typically respond to feedback. I'll give them some time, even send them the video, have them watch it, so that they can kind of get comfortable with what happened first. Yes?
You mentioned having 6 matches going at once. How do you manage that? Sometimes we'll have 3 or 4 courts going.
Yes.
Do you coach all of them or don't coach at all? How do you manage that?
I've been doing this for 11 years. At my first few years at Valparaiso, where I was before, we had 2 coaches, and we went through all 6 courts together. So I for sure coached all 6 players during the match. I felt like you can do it as long as you're really paying attention to what's happening, and like the question over here, understanding where the impact needs to be made and being there. When I came to Baylor and as an assistant at first, the biggest thing was, okay, you're going to take 2 courts and focus on those 2 courts. Ever since then, that's how we've done it. We have 3 coaches. Each coach has 2 courts, and very rarely will I step on the toes of another one of the coaches and say, I'm going to go over there and help him manage this player. Depending on the layout of the court, this is going to be a long answer for you, but depending on the layout of the court, maybe we can't get the 2 guys that we typically work with, so there's a player out that I've worked with all year that I don't have today, and if it gets to be a pressure situation and I've got a lot of experience with him managing competition, I will go over there and help. But I usually try not to step on toes. I think it can be done, and I have a ton of respect for however many matches you guys manage, but I think that you have to make sure you're getting around, but really understand where the impact can be made and focusing on those courts, because as I'm training young coaches, and we'll scrimmage. So like we had 200 fans at a inter squad match last week on a Wednesday night. Everybody's screaming, it's chaos, and of course the players are feeling pressure. And I had a guy serving 5-2 up in the first set. Okay, our number 2 guy's playing, our number 1 guy serving 5-2 in the first set. His coach, I'm sitting in the stands evaluating. His coach is 4 courts away with a guy who is for sure going to win. If you could just watch the body language of the 2 players, one is taking off his player, the other one's going straight down the tubes. Of course, I'm not happy about it as the coach, but he's done. But the coach was trying to get him to break serve at 5-3 to win by 2 breaks. So he was really focused on this court. Meanwhile, the other guy is down love 30 on his serve. He starts to get frustrated. I can see it because I've dealt with these 2 guys for 5 years. He's going to lose that set if somebody doesn't get over to him. No one went over to this player. He lost all 5 games. He lost 7-5. They lost on that match. And so I think being able to understand the dynamic, not just of who your players are and what they might do and their tendencies, but what's happening on the other side too. Because maybe your guy who he was paying attention to, I completely understood what he was doing. My guy, not the best competitor, gets very frustrated very easily. But the guy he was playing was even worse in this particular situation. And so the focus needed to be 4 courts away, and it wasn't, and it ultimately cost his team. Yes?
Just kind of building on that, you've been talking mostly about the players managing the match. Can you share with us some of your cues on you managing the match? You have these guys that you're spending years of your life with, and then you see them doing the same thing you've talked about a million times. What are some cues that really get you back engaged in a positive way?
I think as a young coach, very young, I was very fiery, and I wanted to make the impact, and I wanted to see it right away. And that caused me to be and also defending the player. If something happened, if there was a call or unofficial, or maybe an opponent, an opposing coach, I would get very engaged with everything that was happening, and get very fiery. I am naturally very confrontational. So I was ready to get on board with whatever my team needed. I thought I was helping the players. But I was just I mean, as I've looked back and grown as a coach, I was very distracting to the players. I think that there's so much more opportunity for us as coaches to mess things up than there is to actually help them. And so understanding who each player is and making sure you're consistent with the message is key. You know, you're supportive, but relatively even keel. One of the first things I'll tell anybody that works with us is, okay, I'm telling you, one of these guys, there's going to be a situation where your player is right on top of the net on a deuce point, no ad scoring, and they're going to somehow miss that ball. Do not react. Like, you have to stand there. There's a video of Brad Stevens at Butler where he had the worst, I can't remember what game it was, but his player messed up so bad, and I mean, Brad just stood there like this. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And then they came back and ended up making a huge play and turning it and winning the game. And I just felt like that was very powerful, because it's never as good or as bad as the player really thinks. You know, and so don't go too crazy. I mean, meet them with positive emotion when they're excited, for sure. I love to get fired up, but you don't want to go too much, because it'll get them out of their their kind of equilibrium. And definitely you can never ever react negatively to them, no matter how bad they screwed up. And it happens all the time. I think it's hard enough for them as it is. So for me, it's about understanding, okay, these are my players. My freshmen, now our coaching might be a little bit different. I'm on them every single point. You know, this is the pattern that you're trying to play. This is the routine. Go to your towel, next point, active feet, up on the baseline, whatever it might be. And I'm very engaging with them, but just very like right here. You know, if the worst thing happens, no problem, I'm gonna give them a high five. If they break serve, no problem, I'm gonna give them a high five, and we're gonna move on. As my guys get older, I'm trying to coach myself out of a job to a point where they can manage the match without me saying or doing anything. I'm there if you need me. If I see something strategically, tactically, I'll tell them if I don't think it's working, but ideally, they can do it on their own, because that's what they're trying to do at the next level, is to be able to do it on their own. And so, I've learned over time to just try to stay right here, understand what the cues are, and it's different for each player, but be able to utilize those cues consistently when things are going well and when things are going poorly, so they don't feel that pressure like, coach is really happy with me, and I know that, because then the next match he might be losing 6-1, 3-0, and he can tell coach isn't happy with me, and I don't want that for my guys. Any other questions? What time is it? Yes.
Can rituals be effective in creating a smoke screen of your state of mind or your state of play or your strategy, or is that too far in the weeds?
A smoke screen meaning?
Of how you actually feel like, let's say you have a sore knee,
Yes.
or you are exhausted, is it actually effective in hiding that?
Yes, 100%. I talked about my Romanian player a little bit ago. His best match he ever played was against Will Blumberg, who many of you guys may know. He played at Carolina. He was a 10-time All-American. They played in the quarterfinals of NCAAs 2 years ago. So we played in the finals against Florida as a team on Saturday night at 9:30 p.m. We finished after midnight. Okay, we had played quarters, semis, finals 3 days in a row. The next day at 6 p.m., Adrian had to play again. And he won in 3 sets. And then he had to play again. He won in 3 sets. And then he won the next day, 3 sets. So he's 7 matches in, and he has to play Will Blumberg, who people would say was the best college player at that time, playing for the U.S. Open wild card. And Adrian's like, I can't do it. I'm exhausted. My knees hurt. My back hurts. He was a disaster. I was like, you're not playing. I actually thought he was going to get hurt because he's so competitive. He really is going to hurt himself to try to win. And I said, listen, you're pulling out. And he's like, Coach, I can't do it. Like, I just can't do it. You go up to the desk and pull me out. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So it's on you, buddy. It's your tournament. I'll be out there with you. But what I'm not going to have, he's like, okay, then I'm playing. If you react negatively one time, you're out. I'm pulling you off the court. we had this discussion because the previous 3 matches were an absolute disaster. I mean, screaming, hollering, rackets, the whole bit, because he was so tired emotionally. We lost in the finals. He broke every single one of his rackets in the bathroom in tears after the match. He'll be mad that I'm sharing this, but because it meant so much to him. He had to use his teammates' rackets, and he made the semis of individuals. I mean, literally a different racket, just to play. But I told him, you need to go out there, represent the university, represent yourself well. And actually, he wasn't seeded at that time, and so he needed to win 2 matches to be an All-American. So, I mean, I was willing him to the end of these matches. It was horrible. And I said, I'm not doing it anymore, And against Will Blumberg, you aren't good enough to do all the stuff that you've been doing and still win. And so I told him, no reaction, nothing. You go to the towel, you get the balls, you play the point, no positive, no negative, or I'm pulling you off the court. And he won 6-4, 6-1, and it was the best college match I've ever watched. And I would say the second best match that he ever played was against TCU. Huge match. We were playing for the conference championship, and his knees, he's had knee problems, were so bad that he woke up that morning, he said, I don't think I can play. And he went out there to try to hold the spot and just focused on one point at a time, and he was the one that clinched the match. And I think it just gives you something to focus on. I can't show the opponent that I'm hurt because I am hurt. Or I need to take my time and just focus on this point, because if I think about, oh my gosh, I have to play for 2 hours, I'm gonna think I can't do it. If you're going for a run and I need to get from here to there, I'm going to think, just get to that light pole. Okay, get to the next light pole. Because if I think I have to run an entire marathon, I personally, I wouldn't do it. But if I could just think all I have to do is get to the next light pole, I can probably make it to that light pole. But once I get there, oh, maybe I'll get to the next one. Oh, maybe I'll get to the next one. I'm doing that when I run half a mile. But I mean, I think for big things, that's a good strategy. And I've seen my players play their best when they have an excuse. And they have a reason to say, yeah, I failed because my wrist hurts, and then they'll actually play quite well because they know that they have something built in. But getting them to not show it is the biggest piece. Yeah. I know, I think we're kind of out of time, but does anybody else have any last questions? Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate you. Thank you.